All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this conversation, I'm joined by two musicians and creative minds whose work I've admired for many years. It's my profound honor to welcome Alex and Danielle from Hacke de Picciotto. Greetings. Thank you for joining me.
Hi there. Greetings from Berlin.
Yes, absolutely. I love Berlin. I have quite a few friends out there, so uh, this sort of communication brings the world together in pretty wonderful ways. So very happy to have this conversation. For the viewer who may be unfamiliar with my guests, to give kind of a brief background before going into the latest release and the reason why we're talking, Alex has been involved in a host of musical projects for many years, most notably Einstürzende Neubauten, as well as Crime and the City Solution, one of my all-time favorite bands, and we'll dive into that a little bit as we move forward. Danielle, also a past member of Crime and the City Solution, has done musical projects including Space Cowboys. You've worked in film, which we'll certainly touch on as well. But together, you've been working as Hacke de Picciotto for decades now, have released a number of very captivating albums I would recommend anyone check out if they haven't already. But that brings us to why we're talking, because in just a few days, on the first actually, you are releasing a best of album uh, live in Napoli. So let's kind of start there because this is not a traditional best of release by any means. It's essentially a live recording and sort of reinterpreting certain songs from the back catalog and bringing them into a new light. So let's start there. Um, I would imagine that the best of concept came from the fact that the project has been existing now for 20 years, right? Roughly 20 years. Why present it in this way as opposed to putting out a compilation of this is our looking back? Why go in the direction of sort of revitalizing this material or giving it a different experience in the here and now?
It all kind of has to do with the place that we recorded it at or where we played it live at. We were twice in the same venue called the Auditorium Novecento in Naples, invited to play there in front of a live audience. And it's a huge studio, one of the oldest or the oldest in Europe. And it's usually, actually still used as a studio, but on rare occasions, they organize concerts in there and record the show. And they liked us, we liked them. And we did two shows there, which they recorded, and we recorded our last album there in between those two shows. So we love the place. We love the sound. We love the history. Caruso recorded there. Ennio Morricone co-recorded there. I mean, it's just, filled with historic richness. And when we listened to the live recordings, we thought it's interesting after 20 years to hear these songs and realize how much they've actually changed through live performances, because music changes through live performances a lot. Not all songs, but some do. And so we kind of checked which songs changed the most,
Hmm.
and it turned out that it was a perfect cross selection of all of our albums. So we thought, wow, this is a really good possibility of presenting how our songs have changed over the years, presenting the live energy that music gets through playing live, and presenting basically the best cross selection of all of our work. So it's interesting for people that know our music because they can see how it's developed. And for people who do not know our music, they can hear what our music is about and follow our journey through the whole album. So it kind of just made sense. And then we thought, well, the best of is always a little cheesy, but in this case, it's the best songs that we can perform live. Like those are the songs that turned out to be the best for live performances in a way. And so then we said, okay, we're going to release this, and Mute were enthusiastic and they said, that's a really great idea. Let's do a special edition, a collector's edition, and release it. So that's how it came about.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I can tell you from a fan's perspective, it works for me on so many levels because it does offer that retrospective feel, but then it shows where you were at that particular time and where the music has gone since. I do my very best to stay track of the artists I really like, but you can imagine in my position, there's so much music coming my way. Sometimes things sort of slip through the cracks. So this has been a really wonderful way for me to kind of revisit your history, but also in this new light. What I will say is the sound and the sonics of this recording are just extraordinary. It's just a wonderful sounding record. How much sort of post-recording work had to be done to, if any, to sort of put the pieces together the way they're represented here?
Well, we are conceptually, I don't mind enhancing something, it doesn't have to be like a documentary, but in this case, we didn't really need to do that very very much as in the past, like it has been done, but um on this recording, this studio really is one of the few remaining traditional recording studios that has like a certain spirit to it, like Hitsville in Detroit, or Sun in Memphis, or the Hansa studio in Berlin, or Abbey Road or something. Like uh, on rare occasions, you enter a room that not only has a history, but you can feel that it has a certain spirit to it. The room is live. It is not too boomy. It is not too dry. And it has that. It sets the stage for like almost like a ritualistic experience, and to do that, not only to do recordings there by ourselves, which also was great fun, but also to share the experience in a room like that with people is very special. It's like church.
Right. Absolutely. I am curious because obviously you've built this body of work together in a collaborative way, but individually you each have your own backstories and discographies and projects. Danielle, I first became aware of your work through The Glass House a few years back. At that time, I'd been in touch with Alkeses for some things. I know he's a participant in that project. So you have history and film and music as well away from this. Um, how would you say working together as Hacke de Picciotto has most informed what you now do individually and what you have done individually in the last several years you've worked together?
That's a really interesting question. Nobody's ever asked us that. They usually ask us um, how our individual stories influenced our music together, but not how our dual music influences our single. That's a really good question. Um, Let me think. Well, I mean, for me, I can only speak for myself. Um, it was a journey to find our sound because we had to come from opposite directions. So, it wasn't that we said, okay, one day let's just do music together and that it happened. It was more kind of like an experiment for a couple of years trying to find how our different styles, me coming from classic music and from early electronic music, Alex coming from Neubauten experimental music, early tape loops and stuff, him being very loud, me being very melodic. How to put that together was a long journey. Um, and it taught me a lot, mainly in being free and not being scared. Before, I mean, I was taught classic violin and piano, and when you get taught that, you really are trained to follow a certain metronome or follow a certain kind of. I had a violin teacher that would hit me with a violin bow if I wasn't like doing
Mm,
it exactly the way Bach would have liked. So for me, loosening up and getting away from structures was something I really learned from our collaboration because basically we found our sound by doing exactly that,
mm,
by kind of not really trying to achieve a certain style, but just saying, let's see if our different styles work together. So that's one thing I really learned from working together with Alex, especially because he also comes from a very experimental way of creating music. So that I learned a lot through that in that way, being more free. I don't know. What about you?
Um, I mean, Danielle and I, we have a intimacy and a level of trust with each other, which is something that I have not experienced in any other constellation.
Mm.
That gives me well that it helped me to completely loosen up also in a way by working with her, which is something that I can, you know, apply in well measured dosages, like in the other work that I do. Um, but this is really yeah, for me also I can agree to that. This is the project where I can express myself most freely because of that.
Excellent, excellent. Now, to follow that up with a question I know you've been asked many times already, but to sort of put it into a present context, I know much has been said about this self-described nomadic lifestyle you've led, particularly during the COVID era. I know, Danielle, you've written on the topic, and it's a major component to the project. Um, Now that you've had a bit of time, and a couple of years in that sort of mindset. Where would you say that stands now for you? Are you more acclimated to that philosophy and that lifestyle? Are there still challenges? How is it ultimately driving or impacting what you're doing now with this project and as well as just in your everyday lives?
Well, I mean, we just came back from a tour today that was 2 months, and before that with Neubauten, and before that we've been touring all year. So ever since the pandemic kind of, stopped, we've been back to touring like crazy, which is more touring, but again, it's part of our nomadic life because we still don't have a real home. We have a studio in Berlin, which we got during the pandemic. Um, and it's kind of I mean, it definitely influences our music because every album that we did was heavily influenced from the place that we recorded it in. Like, we recorded in a church in Austria, in Mexico, in where else were we? I can't
The,
remember all
Mo
the
the
places.
Mojave Desert,
Mojave Desert.
Blackpool
Yeah.
by the northwestern coast of England.
And we've been thinking, I mean, after this album, we've been thinking of, how to develop our music more. And one of the things that is really kind of becoming a very pressing issue is that it's so difficult to tour because we have so many instruments. We do everything by train because we're trying to keep our footprint low. So we carry like 100 kilos amongst us all the time, which is on one hand too much, and on the other hand, it's restraining because we can't add any new music instruments or ideas. So we're thinking of how to deal with that, how to tour and travel and be freer in that way. So I don't know if that means being more electronic or I don't know. So in that way, it is still influencing our music, definitely. And we still don't know exactly how it's going to end, right?
Yeah. Uh,
Well, I mean, let's face it though, do we know how anything is going to end? I mean, we don't know how this conversation's going to end, Hopefully the sun will rise tomorrow, but we'll have to wait and see, right?
Especially nowadays, you never know what's going
yeah,
to
like
happen.
in a week. We don't know how it's all gonna go within the week.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna hide under a rock pretty soon. I think that's gonna be my solution for a bit. I wanted to touch on a little bit about Crime and Its a Solution. One of my all-time favorite bands, Wings of Desire, is one of the greatest movies of all time, and obviously they have a pivotal scene in that. Alex, you did two stints in the band. The last one being the American Twilight era, which I guess was around 2012.
Correct.
Um, Interesting lineup of musicians, a couple of Americans in there, as we mentioned before we started recording. Our mutual friend Troy Gregory was in the band at that point. Um, Looking back now, how would you compare the two eras that you spent in the band and the two stints? And is there one that in hindsight you prefer to the other?
Um, well, I definitely would not want to be 24 again and as confused and as constantly high as I was in the late 80s. You know, that's I don't regret a thing, but I very much prefer to be in charge of what I do and what happens. Um, More so than I was back in the 80s. Those were wild days and the explorations were exciting and we traveled through many heights and depth and yeah, and it was all very exciting and very existentialistic and deep. And also, I think considering how effed up we were, um, the music, stands the test of time quite well, and I am very proud of. That we actually managed to create something that is timeless and that I still get people tell me that they particular things that we did or my guitar style or whatever influenced them or something, and I'm very proud of that. And the second time around, that was when we all gathered in Detroit and spent like a great amount of time in that place and with uh with Matthew Smith in the in Hamtramck and and just the that particular vibe and that particular stage the city was in back in 2012 was also very exciting in that regard, and and also to be with Danielle and also having David Eugene Edwards involved in this and like this
Doing the
crazy,
right.
yeah, this crazy compilation of diverse musicians, the octopus man who never plays anything twice, and like the highly spiritual David Eugene Edwards and having Danielle there and we created this kind of very cinema scope kind of thing, which also I think was a a development that kind of suited the original vibe of the group very well, I think.
Absolutely. How about you, Danielle? Because I know you were involved in that second incarnation with Alex, the American Twilight era. What remains sort of a standout in your mind when you think back at that era?
Well, it was the first time that I was invited to participate in a musical project as a visual artist.
Hmm.
And that was kind of like a dream come true. Because I mean, I was singing background and I was playing a little bit of auto harp, but mainly I was doing the visuals. So I did the visuals for the homepage, I did the record cover, I did the videos, I did the stage visuals. It was like a lot of work. I worked on it for almost a year and a half, I think, to prepare everything. And because Simon said that he had always dreamt of having a visual artist be part of the band. And I thought that was just wonderful. I mean, I just love working in groups of people. I just love it. It's my happiest state. Um, and to be working with all of them musically and visually, artistically, it was a dream come true. It was wonderful.
Excellent. Yeah, and as I said, I love that record in particular and the band in general. Certainly one of my go-to bands for many, many years. I watched Wings of Desire at 11 years old, and that's what did it for me. So still
There you
listening, still enjoying. Um, I'm curious, Alex, because I was thinking back to the first time I saw Neubauten, which would have been the Perpetuum Mobile tour out in Los Angeles, the El Rey Theater. And a couple of things stand out for me. Number one, it was a great show, but A, I love the fact that after the show, you can go to the merch table and buy the album of the show, which was really kind of unheard of at the time. And even more unheard of back then was the fact that the band was ground zero for what's now crowdfunding, which has taken over the industry. And, the very fact that we're having this conversation, I'm talking to you from my apartment in New Hampshire, you're talking to me in Berlin, these things weren't really possible 20 years ago. So, specifically with crowdfunding, I am curious because Neubauten did have that very early experience. What are your thoughts on how that concept and perhaps the overriding world of online marketing changed since the early days of that initial project?
Well, for me, that the event of the supporter project sort of saved the band in a way because Neubauten always was non-conformist, unconventional in its philosophy and in its approach. And at that time in 2000, we found ourselves in a sort of repetitive grind, like many other artists. You do a record, you do a tour, you do a record, you do a tour, and you go in depth in order to make a record, and then you make the tour, and and it was kind of it was boring. And then this this and when this idea came up to say like let's bypass the middleman, let's bypass the record company and just go straight, converse straight with the fans, with the end consumer, and also give them that sense of intimacy for one thing, and also uh, give them what they want and have them, pay for it directly rather than have them give money to someone who then gives us our share of it. That gave us a great sense of freedom in retrospect, but also it was exciting because we didn't know how it would, if we were going to pull it off. It was like a test balloon. We could have maybe just have gotten a few people, and also the community that was created at the time was also really great, because we not only pioneered crowdfunding but also social media, if you will, because that we had those forums and chat rooms and also streaming, because we had people watching us produce a record, and they would give us comments and hints, like when we would scrap a piece, they would say like, no, 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 this is really great. And we go, why? And then they say, yeah, this is great because Andrew did this and you all reacted like that. And so like, "Ooh, okay, no, that's not, I mean, it wasn't a democratic process, but still. And also the one thing also that was interesting was we were a bit, or we were thinking about how this intimacy could be demystifying for people, and whether that would be a positive development or a bad thing. And actually, it turned out that it even added more myth by by letting people uh, get closer to us. So it was a great development, and it was a great time. And we stopped doing it now after many years, because to continue working with crowdfunding and that way, it's sort of obsolete for us now. So we would know about, we are looking into new ways, and see if we can come up with something that hasn't been done before.
Mm, mm. Staying with Neubauten for a moment, next year will be 45 years of you being a member of the band. And it's really been yourself, Blixa, and Andrew who've been the core throughout that time. Very few things last 45 years. If a band lasts 45 weeks, it's an achievement in many ways. Um, and you're also producing sounds that are often very challenging and not the traditional route, which I would imagine has made things perhaps difficult at times, producing revenue and things of that nature. Um, thank you for still being around. I'm always excited when I hear new music from you. But for you, what continues to make that work, particularly with Blixa and Andrew, to where after 45 years, there's still that sense of adventure and desire to work together to see what does come next.
Um, there is a really great commentary by Joseph Conrad. Not Joseph Conrad, Joseph Campbell. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell.
Say what?
About relationships. That a relationship is not about your preferences or you per se, and it isn't either about the other person in the relationship. It is the relationship becomes an entity in itself. And and with Neubauten, I had that feeling for a long time. Neubauten is sort of an entity of itself, and we sort of we serve that that beast. And in many ways, it is like a dinosaur, like a what are they? The ones that have like a very tiny head on a very long leg, and that
Nick.
long neck, and that tiny brain controls these like massive legs. So also, the way Neubauer moves is kind of prehistoric and very archaic and slow in that respect. But it definitely is its own entity, and if it wasn't that, if it hadn't surpassed the realm of a regular band, then we wouldn't be around anymore. It has become this mystical creature, uh, for one thing, and then also, the our level of what we try to do is pretty high, where we're not, we don't compromise, and that also keeps it
Challenging.
challenging and interesting, and that's also, you know, if we were to play, also Neubauten released the greatest hits record, and the notion is similar with us. Of course, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, like because if we were serving the public in that matter, by playing what the people want, um, then we would find ourselves in a position of being a servant, and and this way we surpass that, and we do different things. But what Danielle and I do is actually more important to me in a way. But And I think the other members of Neubauten have same kind of things in their life. Also, Neubauten would not exist if we were all reduced to the output that we have with Neubauten. So
Hmm.
that we do these other things uh, was essential for the group to stay together. If Blixer hadn't done his stint with the bad seeds, and being in this kind of scene and lifestyle, and in this kind of constellation, Neubauten, he would have demanded very different things from us, and or from Neubauten, and same here. There's so many different things that I feel I have to do. And there's great things I can do with Neubauten, but there's also things that I definitely cannot do with Neubauten. And so I have to do them elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've always appreciated artists who, as they've progressed, have gone other places, have gone somewhere else, and have taken the listener somewhere else. And Neubauten is one of those bands where I may not even hear a note of a new album, but I'll get it because I know it's going to take me somewhere else. I don't know where that's going to be, but I have the trust that I've trusted you long enough to know wherever you guys arrive at is going to be very interesting and very impactful. And, I thank you for the 45 years of that band. And I'm equally delighted to talk about this current project that you both will be releasing just in a couple of days. And I know you mentioned you just got back from tour. The journalist in me would love to talk to you for hours, but the musician in me wants to give you some proper rest. So I want to close with this question. Basically, we're coming at the end of another year. Lord knows what's going to happen in the States the next couple months, but that aside, what are some of the foreseeable plans and projects ahead, either collectively or individually for 2025?
Well, for one thing, we're going to be doing music for a theater play next year, for a French theater play of a really great director called Sophie Perez in Paris. And we're really looking forward to that because, as I mentioned before, I love working in groups, and we always love doing film or theater music. We just finished a film film score, which is going to be released next year. So we're actually going to be doing a lot of collaborative stuff, which is
Mm.
something that we're very happy about. Besides that, we're going to be touring with this album, of course, all year. It's going to be Alex's birthday, and we're going to be celebrating that with all kinds of interesting stuff and releases, or he will be.
I'll be
Um,
60 next year.
so that's a big one. So there's all kinds of great stuff coming out that he's preparing and that we're preparing. And I'm working on a new graphic novel. So we're going to be busy.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'll be sure in the video description to include several links to Bandcamp, either collectively or individually. I'll put as much as I can find in one place. And
Or
just
you
to,
can just put the Hacke de Picciotto Bandcamp. Everything we do separately is also on there. You can just like people can deep dive into the Hacke de Picciotto Bandcamp.
Excellent. I would recommend a viewer do so, especially if either it's been some time before you've checked in with Danielle and Alexander, or totally new to it. Now is the time to check this out. And I definitely want to remind people of the best of Hacke de Picciotto coming out Friday on Mute Records. It's going to be in 500 copies on double vinyl, a signed print digitally, various formats.
50% are 50% are already sold. So it's
Wow.
250 that's left, even before the release date. So
Oh, wow. 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 Well, I will put information in the description so people can hopefully snag one of the remaining 250 copies. But in the meantime, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you both. Love the
Likewise.
album. I've drawn great inspiration from you personally and musically from you both over the years. It's lovely to see you so active in the here and now, and I really look forward to what's going to come down the road. So, perhaps our paths will cross again, but in the meantime, please get some rest, and perhaps we'll touch base at some point next year.
thank you.
Thank you, Joel.
My pleasure.